What's up, everybody? Good to see you. Good to see you. Let me double check something here because this should be on a different screen. There we go. That's showing the right one now. So, what's up? What's up? So the plan for today is to go through ZBrush with all of you. Okay. So ZBrush, I'm gonna make sure I think I have 21 installed, which is good. We're gonna go through ZBrush, a little bit of an introduction into ZBrush, and then talk about the assignment. Okay. So let me make sure my ZBrush is actually working properly, which I think it is. Cool. Okay, so that's working. Let's get hello. Let's get the assignment pulled up here. Hope you all had a good weekend. We're going to talk about that here for a second. It's not too hard to get. ZBrush is the only software where the free option, I think, is not even worth your time, to be honest with you. Just because of how cheap and how simple it is to sign up for the software. It's $10, so. A great weekend in the snow. Hopefully we're doing something fun in the snow instead of just shoveling. Snowboarding, doing something fun. Cool. Perfect. Okay. There you go. Yep. Up there shredding. Sweet. Okay, so last assignment for the class, which is crazy. Couple week assignment. Okay. We're going to be working on a creature sculpt in ZBrush. Okay. I have these 5 concepts here. You're going to pick one of these. So I'm going to limit it to one of these concepts, and you're going to sculpt one of these. Okay. So don't go on the internet and find your own. Just pick one of these ones. One, I think all of these are in scope and relatively simple enough shapes that they shouldn't make you want to go crazy. So, we're going to take them into ZBrush and sculpt, and we'll go through the process of using Dynamesh, using ZRemesher, all those good tools to sculpt these guys out. Okay. And then you can paint. We'll talk about painting them as well. So you're going to sculpt it and then paint it. So that'll be fun. Yes, ZBrush is a subscription, so let's get into that really quick. So, ZBrush is a subscription-based software. It is insanely cheap for students now. The reason why it was a hassle in the past was because ZBrush licenses were several $100s. I think I paid $800 or $900 for my ZBrush license when I was a freshman. It was really, really expensive, okay? But now Maxon, the company that owns Cinema 4D, has purchased ZBrush. and they've made it super available to people. So if you go to Maxon's website, which is Maxon, I think, okay, and you go to Maxon's website, if you go to buy and you go to pricing, you can go to monthly and you can go to students and teachers. I don't even think you need to do monthly. You can just go to students and teachers. Okay. You can get a license for Maxon 1, which is all of Maxon's software. Okay. And it's $9.99 semi-annually. So you get billed $9.99 twice a year. So $20 a year for ZBrush. Okay. And if you don't, you can cancel it at any time. So if you want to, so if you want to pay for the $10 and then you don't ever need ZBrush again, just cancel it. Okay. I think that's the easiest way, because the other way is through the school. I have to submit a big list of your IP address and your computer name and all these fun things, and I have to submit them for the school. Sometimes it takes a week or so to get it figured out. This is instant. You pay the $10, download it, you're working, right? So I would just say that all of you should buy the license. Okay. I wouldn't even try it the other way. It's just a hassle. And then you're having to log in through a VPN from your machine, and sometimes the licenses aren't available. This one guarantees that you have a license all the time. So I would just use this. Okay. Makes it easy. $10, you're done. Downloading it today, using it today. Okay. And like I said, you can cancel it if you only use it for this assignment and you never use ZBrush again. You're only out $10. So, and you didn't have to buy anything else for the class. So here's your one textbook cost for the class. Okay. $10 for ZBrush. When you think about it, I paid $800 or $900, so $10 is nothing, right? So I will link this in the Discord, and then you guys can go right here and sign up for it. Put it in all of your guys' things here. Okay. The other thing that I wanted to talk about too was there's some brushes and things that I use inside of ZBrush, but we can talk about that. Oh, it is on the homepage of Canvas. Cool. Nice. I forgot that I put it there too. Cool. I forgot that I put it there. So, if you don't have ZBrush yet, go ahead and follow that. Go through that process. I think that's the easiest thing to do. As far as getting into ZBrush today, I will open up the software. We'll go through it. I'll talk about navigation. I'll talk about some hotkeys. And then if we have time, I'll even get into starting to model one of these creatures. Okay. If not, if we don't get quite to it today, then we will next week. But so let's jump right. Any questions before we jump into ZBrush? Throw them in the chat. If you guys got any hangups or questions about what's going on, let me know. Throw them in the chat. Let me hear them. I saw that a good chunk of you signed up for the times to face or screen share with me. So in the slots where we have multiple people in there, I'll split up that 15-minute time period to a couple minutes per person. If it ends up taking longer than that, we may end up bumping some of these people that have the later times selected. Okay. But that's okay. Hopefully most of you are just a couple minutes and we'll get it figured out. Okay. Yeah, verify your student status. Yeah, they have something that makes you check whether or not you're a student. Okay. Anybody else that has any questions? If you've used ZBrush before, ZBrush is only on Windows. I don't think so. No, ZBrush is not only on Windows. Yeah, no, operating systems. You can use ZBrush on a Mac. So you're good. I didn't think it was only Windows. So you should be good. Other questions? I just want to make sure everybody's getting what they need from me. Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Dominic. I'll just start with the first person that signed up and I'll call, and then I'll just call everybody that signed up. Okay? In that order. So. Okay, let's jump into ZBrush. Let's talk some ZBrush, okay? So, some things to think about when we're talking about ZBrush. There are some things that are similar to Maya, right? There are also some things that are very different from Maya. I kind of think of them in two different ways. Maya is very mathematical in a sense of like, let's push and pull vertices, faces, edges by incremental amounts that we can type into a keyboard slot, that we can, you know, really get down to the nitty-gritty fine number details of things inside of Maya, right? ZBrush, on the other hand, is almost as if somebody drops a piece of clay in front of you and says, okay, start modeling, right? It's a little different, and it takes a minute to get used to, but I think ZBrush is super useful and crazy. It's insane, the level of detail and the things that you can do inside of this software and how quickly and efficiently you can get things done, right? You can model a human head in Maya, but it's so much slower to do that than it is in ZBrush. You can be done with a quick like model of a bust in, you know, an hour, where in Maya it could take you a lot longer than that to get all the edge loops and things figured out properly, right? So let's talk about kind of how it functions. When ZBrush was first created, it was built as a 3D painting software. So as you can see right now, I'm painting with this weird 3D tool, right? And I can grab and paint with spheres, right? Currently I'm painting with a sphere. I'm doing a drag rectangle. I could paint with spheres. It was built as a 3D painting software, right? It was never really designed, and there are lots of remnants that live with that, right? So it was designed to paint with 3D objects, okay? So when it kept getting used more and more, people started realizing that there are tools and things in here that were really nice for actually sculpting and modeling in 3D. So over the years, as ZBrush has developed, it's pushed more and more into that realm, and now it's the industry standard for 3D modeling. So let's talk about kind of how it functions. So when you first open up ZBrush, it's going to look something like this, okay? The promo code for, let me get the service for $10. Where do I put the promo code? I actually haven't even signed up for it here. But I would imagine when you go to buy it, oh, see, and I got a promo code for free. 6 months per subscription promo code. Oh yeah, by ordering a 6-month subscription, you will get a promo code to access the software on Maxon website. You will be charged $9.99 USD. Add to cart. I think you then have to register here. So you type in an email address. Just follow these steps. I already have ZBrush, so I'm not going to sign up, but yeah, hopefully that works. Okay. And you guys will be in a newer version of ZBrush. I'm using this older version because my up-to-date ZBrush has a custom UI. So I want to work through it with the standard UI for you guys at first, so you aren't totally confused about what's going on. But anyways, let's drop a sphere in here. So to do so, I can do that same thing where I was painting with those spheres before. I can hit Control-N on my keyboard to clear the screen. But in that drag rectangle mode under the stroke over here, if I just drag a sphere in here, there's a couple things I can do to start working with this in 3D. Because if I don't push any buttons and I start trying to do things, it's just going to keep drawing more spheres, right? So let's draw one sphere here. And then I can do a couple things. The first thing I'm going to do is up here on the toolbar, I'm going to click Edit, okay? And then once I have a sphere in here that's in the 3D space, we'll go through the whole UI. So I clicked Edit, and then I can now start painting on this once I make it a 3D mesh. So now that I hit Edit, I just need to go over here and hit Make Polymesh 3D. So if I click that, now I can start sculpting on this mesh, okay? But we'll talk about those in a second. I just wanted to get a sphere in here so you could see what's going on. So ZBrush is really built to be used with a tablet. So luckily you guys got a tablet for the class, right? Or in the labs, you can use it on the Cintiq, same thing. But I'm not saying it can be done with a mouse. Corey Lauder, is anyone having an issue when they go to pay? The account sign-in isn't working. Excuse me. I'm not sure. You may have to wait a second and try again. If anyone else is having the problem, let Court know. Okay. So we're inside the software. Okay. We've created the Polymesh 3D. Now we can start sculpting. We have a bunch of different brushes. So what I want to do now is go through movement, talk about the UI a little bit. Okay. So you have on the left-hand side of the screen, you have this little hub with a bunch of different buttons here. Okay. The top one here is your repository of brushes. In ZBrush, they're called brushes. You'll hear me, I slip up and call them tools all the time. But these are your brushes, okay? There's a ton of different brushes inside of ZBrush, and there's even more brushes that you can download that I use on a daily basis when I'm using the software. There's other brushes that I've downloaded. There's things that you can download and use and implement into the software. So that's this first button. Second one here is the strokes. So there's a couple different ways in which your brushes can be used inside of ZBrush, right? You can, oh my goodness. Excuse me, I'm yawning a bunch. Drag rectangle is kind of what you saw before. I'm dragging like a rectangle of the current brush that I'm using. It's not great for what we're doing right now. Freehand is probably the one you're going to use the most. There's the dots or drag dots as well, which works just fine too. So that's under your stroke, okay? Alpha here is kind of similar to what we've seen in other pieces of software. which these are just different ways that it can manipulate your brush. So if you have your brush set to the standard brush and you're painting with the dot stroke and you use a square alpha, it's going to give you a square type brush, right? If you use the star or the ring, it's going to give you a different look. You use this alpha, it's going to give you a little bit different look, how it's affecting the surface. Okay. So different alphas. You then have your texture. When you're working with a texture, we'll talk about that a little bit later. This one is the material button where you can change different materials inside of ZBrush. This current one is called the matte cap red. It's the standard material. I don't love the red. I end up sculpting a lot in the gray because this is what I'm used to. But you can change the color of it too if you want. This is more for when you start painting, but you can also change colors of things with this. Ugh. I need an energy drink or something. I'm dying over here. Okay. So that's the left-hand side of the screen. We will really only focus on a couple of these buttons for right now. At the top, the light box is open when you first open up ZBrush. This is just a hub for different files that you've worked on. Also different default projects that you can use inside of ZBrush. If you double click on one of these, you can start with one of these default projects and work with them. Okay. We have a live Boolean feature, which we've done Booleans in Maya, very similar to what you did in live Booleans like we've done in Maya. They work a little bit differently here in ZBrush, but we can talk about those for sure. Then you have your standard move buttons. You have edit, you have draw. So these are two different buttons that you haven't quite seen before. But then you have your standard buttons that you have inside of Maya as well. So W, E, and R all function the same way that they do in Maya. So W is move. You can move stuff with the little anchor point. E is scale. You can scale. R is rotate. Okay. Very similar to what you can do in Maya. When you push one button, you can also kind of do all of them in that one button. So you can move, scale, and rotate all within one of those buttons. Okay. And then going back to draw is when you can start sculpting again on your mesh. Okay. Then you've got some more buttons over here that aren't going to mean a whole lot to you for a little bit, but Z add and Z sub will make sense to you. Z add is when it's going to build up clay, and Z sub is when it's going to take it away. Okay. You can also hold Alt on your keyboard and it will swap for you. So let me see what's going on here. Yeah. Cool. So the Z intensity is almost like your how much ink is on your brush in a sense, but it's how intense that brush is. So right now I'm using the standard brush, which is just going to kind of paint up clay, right, a little bit. But if I change the intensity on that brush, it's going to start building up a lot more clay, right? So that's what the Z intensity slider does. The focal shift is going to change how much fall off or feathering there is on your brush, right? If you have that focal shift really close and tight to the edge, it's going to really hug the edge of the brush, the edge of the brush with no fall off, right? Where you change that focal shift, one, it makes the point a little bit smaller too. Like you can make a really fine point with that. So, and then you can change the draw size too. So you can have a really big draw size and have a small focal shift that's going to kind of build up everywhere, but then have a really small focal point on that brush. Okay. So you can mess around with that and see how you want that to work. You can just kind of see how that functions, right? If I change that focal point, it's still working, but I can affect a smaller area with that focal shift, right? And I can take clay away and stuff too. So, okay. Trying to model a piece of popcorn. All right. So that's your focal shift and your brush size. The hotkey for your brush size is the same as it is in Photoshop, so that makes it nice. Something you're used to. The bracket keys will increase and decrease the size of your brush in ZBrush, okay? All right, at the top here, there are a ton of menus, and I don't think we're gonna get into all of them, but I will try my best to tell you when I'm jumping into a different menu up here at the top. However, the right-hand side, we do have a bunch of menus, and we will get into a good chunk of these. So I will make sure that I'm telling you which sub-menu it is on the side over here when I start working and talking about certain things. The ones you're going to really want to familiarize yourself with are the subtool menu. This houses basically your layers or your subtools in ZBrush, right? You have different pieces of geometry that are called subtools, right? So right now we have one subtool in here, which is the sphere. If we add or append other subtools in here, let's say we wanted a cube in here with this sphere, right? We have, we have a cube in here now with our sphere. We're making something so amazing. I don't know what it is, but now we have a cube in here with our sphere, right? Now we have two subtools. So you can change between subtools when you're working. It works in layers, right? So you can organize them however you want. You can double click on them and rename them. You can do all that good stuff. If you're working on one subtool and you're painting and sculpting, it's not going to affect another subtool layer, right? So that's how that works. So familiarize yourself with this subtool menu because we will be using some things in here. Duplicating subtools is super helpful. Appending in other subtools, splitting apart meshes. The Boolean function lives within here too. So this subtool menu is really helpful and you're going to live in there a lot. The next one to take a look at is the geometry subtool. This one is going to house all of your information about the current mesh that you're working on. And we're going to use this quite a bit today. This is where you're going to up-res your geometry inside of ZBrush. And we'll talk about that here in just a second. Okay. Then you've got some other subtool or sub menus that are really helpful. Deformations is a good one. This has a lot of different sliders and things that we can use. Namely, the biggest ones are the mirror function, lives within the deformations tab. Masking is a good one because it allows you to shrink, clear, blur masks, right? You can mask out certain parts of your mesh and then start sculpting and it won't affect that parts that is being masked, right? So that's where that lives, okay? The other ones in here aren't crazy. We'll talk about polypaint a little bit. Nothing else too crazy quite yet. So the big ones, subtool, geometry, deformations, masking. Those are going to be the ones that you're really going to want to take a look at for the most part. Okay. And we will be working in those. So just familiarize yourselves with those. You can click and drag in the gray space on the right hand side of the screen and it allows you to scroll up and down in these. Sometimes students get a little worried or like, hey, I can't get to this part of the menu. You just need to click in the gray space and then it will let you scroll up and down in here. Especially happens when you have multiple ones of these open. Like you've got subtool, geometry's open, you've got some other things open too, right? You're trying to get all these figured out. So above this subtool or submenu, above all these submenus is another set of menus and buttons above this called your tool menu. Okay. Here you can load in different tools, and remember, tools are just different pieces of geometry. Okay. So you've got different tools you can load in, or you can load tools that you've saved out of ZBrush. You can import other pieces of geometry. You can export out of here, all that good stuff. Okay. And then this little menu here is a history of all the different meshes you've used currently. The simple brush allows you to the simple brush allows you to paint in more stuff, but sometimes that's not what you want to do, and it ends up jacking your stuff up. So just be aware of that, and I will do my best to help you guys figure that out when that starts to happen. Okay, let's talk about movement in general. Okay, so we've talked about some menus. So now once you're in here, I've got my lovely cube and my lovely sphere. Movement is kind of odd in this software, I'm not going to lie. It's a weird movement system and ends up being really awkward, but you'll get used to it. So when you finally got your mesh in here, like we did, if you click in the open space and drag, it allows you to rotate the model. Okay, so I'm rotating all around it. I'm just clicking and dragging with my left click. Okay, if I hold shift while I'm clicking and dragging, this allows me to rotate in orthographical views. So I can shift it around in 90-degree increments by holding shift. Okay, so I'm rotating, I'm holding shift. You can kind of see it snapping, right? So I could be rotating over here, and let's say I want to get to the front of this cube square thing that's happening. If I hold shift and just kind of click and drag, it will snap to that direction. You'll also notice that up in the top right hand corner here, that it's going to show you this little head moving around. I can click and drag on this head too and rotate my object with this little head. So if this is super helpful too. Okay, because one, it also keeps you oriented in your space and lets you know when you're facing frontwards, backwards, the side of an object, right? So very cool. The next one that's a little weird is Alt, and actually it's not weird. Alt and left click is probably the most standard button combination we have in this software. Alt and left click in the open space allows you to pan. Okay, and then if you Alt, I think is it Control? Yes. Okay, so Alt and left click allows you to pan. Control and right click and scrub allows you to zoom. Okay. So this is your zoom key. So you kind of just have to jump mouse buttons and off of the Alt key, which is odd because normally a lot of this stuff is controlled with the Alt key, especially if you're used to Maya, right? But Control and right click allows you to scrub zoom. Alt left click allows you to pan. Clicking and dragging in the open space allows you to rotate around your model. Okay. If you've rotated, moved, panned, if you hit F on your keyboard, it's going to frame your object in the scene. Okay. So sometimes you may zoom in and then you're like, oh crap, I can't rotate because I can't see anything now. Go over to your subtool menu, click on one of your subtools and hit F on your keyboard. It will zoom out enough and frame it in the scene so that you can move around. Okay. So those are some good hotkeys for you. Okay. The next thing to take a look at, right, is some other things that we can see inside of the software. So if you want to be able to see what your poly mesh looks like, there is the ability to turn on your polyfill, which is over here on the side menu, which is the last kind of menu we haven't quite talked about yet. But there's some things you can turn on and off. This one is probably the one that I'll turn on and off the most. This allows you to see what the polygons look like on your mesh. We aren't crazy worried about n-gons and triangles and things like we were inside of Maya, inside of ZBrush, because it spits out clean geometry for you most of the time. Where you do get into the issue of needing cleaner geometry is when you start remeshing things, and we'll talk about how that remesher works in a little bit. But for the most part, you're not super stressed about n-gons and triangles until you start having to retopologize these high-res meshes that you build in ZBrush. So the next thing to talk about is there's not a whole lot on this menu outside of that one. There is some stuff in here, but not super helpful for today. You can turn on a floor if you want to be able to see the floor, or different angles, right? You can turn on the floor here. So if you like being able to see the floor like you can in Maya, you can do that in ZBrush too. Okay. But let's talk about the biggest thing that ZBrush is useful for. If I start sculpting on this sphere right now, right, you'll notice that I can still relatively see a good chunk of polygons, right? It's still kind of pixelated, not very high resolution. This is not great for what the software is meant to do, right? This software is built to really push how many polygons you can actively work with at once. If I were to start working with hundreds of thousands of polygons in Maya right off the bat, it's going to bog it down. It can handle it if you have a really strong machine, but it starts to bog down really quickly. ZBrush is meant to be worked in millions of polygons. So right now you can see if I'm using the standard brush, I can paint on this sphere, right? And it's sculpting, but it's still relatively low res. So let's go to the geometry menu over here and hit divide on this a couple times. And I want you to watch the active points right here at the top. So if I hit divide, now I'm at 32,000 polygons. That's a pretty hefty shift. And you can already see that it's starting to smooth out those strokes that I was putting in before. Let's divide it again. Now I'm at 130,000 polygons. When I paint on this, it's really hard to see unless I zoom in close that detail, and I can click on here and show you what that mesh looks like, right? We've gone from this level of polygons, we stepped it up once, and then we subdivided it again. Now we're working in a huge level of polygons. If I divide this again, okay, now we're at 500,000 polygons. Now I really have a nice level of resolution here to work with that I would feel comfortable starting to sculpt with, and it's a good high resolution that's going to look nice and smooth on a lot of things, right? 500,000 polygons is a huge amount. Okay, but we can go further. If I divide this again, now I'm at 2 million polygons. Okay, we're just on one little sphere. This is so high res that, like, this is really, really solid. And you can even go further, right? You could start taking this further and further. But let's sculpt a little bit now, and I can show you the different levels of detail. So I'll just quickly kind of model like a skull or something. So let's talk about some of the tools too. So we're at 2 million polygons right now. If I were going to start sculpting something, right, I would start at a lower subdivision level, maybe around that 8 to 32,000 polygon level, right? And I would take my brush and I'm going to find the move topology brush. Okay, it's right here. If you hit M and then T on your keyboard, it's going to take you into your move topology brush. And what that brush is going to do, instead of what the standard brush does, where it kind of builds up clay, like almost as if you're painting with like a mound of clay, the move topology is like a push and pull type of brush. Okay, and this is like really thinking about it with using your hands and like real live clay. Like I'm pushing and pulling and kneading this clay in 3D. Sorry guys, give me 1 second. Okay, sorry, I'm back. Let's see here. Okay, so the move topology brush, right, is a push and pull type of brush. So let's do like a little stylized kind of skull or something, okay? So if I take a big brush, right, I build that up really like a really large brush, right? And I start pulling, you can see I can pull, and it's pulling a good chunk of that clay around, right? But you may be thinking to yourself, well, I don't want to have to try to guess how much to pull on each side. I don't want to have to try to eyeball it. The cool thing is ZBrush also has a symmetry function that works really well. So if you hit X on your keyboard, I can pull in real time with symmetry on, okay? So we can kind of start shaping out our little skull that we're going to work with, okay? All right. Then you'll notice that as I start pulling, there's some weird kind of stuff happening. One, this is part of the sphere that we chose. It has some really gross geometry on the bottom that's a bunch of triangles, okay? If I hold shift on my keyboard while I'm running over the object, if I hold shift and kind of paint on the object, it's gonna smooth things out for me. So that's one good thing. So shift on your keyboard, you see it turns blue, and then I can smooth. So if I'm using like the standard brush and I paint something on here, right? I'm painting and I want to smooth it out a little bit, right? I can do that with the smooth tool or the smooth brush, okay? So here's my skull. I'm unlocking my pivot. I can reset the pivot when I'm in the move tool, and I can relock it. It's just a nice way if I needed to rotate something a little bit. So I'm going back to my move topology brush. We'll move some things around for a minute. May want to make this a little bigger. We're just going to ignore the underside for a minute. Okay. Then I'm going to use the mask tool for a second too, because I'm going to pull out some of these little teeth just for fun. So I'm going to maybe even push this back up a little bit. Then I'm going to use my masking tool or my masking brush by holding Control, and I can paint my mask. Okay. Let's kind of get some distinct. And then if I hold Control Alt, I can erase in between the masks. Let's try this a little bit more here. Maybe a little smaller brush. Something like this, and then I can go here. If I go over to my masking tool, what I can also do is bump up the geometry too. So if I go to that higher res, then that mask becomes a little smoother, right? And I can go down to my masking tab right here and do a sharpen mask. So see how that kind of really cleans up that line on that mask for me. Now if I hit Control and click in the open space, it will inverse my mask. And then I can use my move topo brush again and pull these out. So I can kind of pull out those teeth that I was trying to build. For a little skull that we're working on. Okay. So I've gotten some teeth there. Now I can turn off my mask, and then I can also smooth this out once I've done that. So we pulled out that mesh. I can go back and smooth this out a little bit if I need to, right? Then I can get in there with some other brushes, maybe the damn standard brush, which is like a carving brush, right? And maybe I don't need that much intensity on there. I can come in here with the damn standard brush, start defining these teeth a little bit more. Okay. So we pulled out our teeth. Cool. Let's go back to the standard brush. So if I click here, I can find the standard brush. I can find brushes that I've been using recently too at the top here. So if I hold Alt, I can push in clay with Alt, right? So I can push in clay here. And then I could do it for the eyes too if I wanted to do some eyes. Some eye holes. Okay. Getting some nice eye holes in there. Then I could go back to my standard brush. Or even my move brush, whichever one. Now I can keep sculpting here, right? And really start building up what this is. I can turn down the intensity too. I can kind of sculpt in here. If I want to define what this bridge of this nose looks like. In here too, maybe. Maybe I want to do something over here. Then I can, oops, use my Move Topo brush again. Jump back to the standard brush. Okay. So we got some stuff going on here. Kind of a little silly looking skull, but that's okay. Check what the underside looks there. Go back to the damn standard brush maybe. So I'm just kind of showing you, like, there's so many different brushes and tools you can use in here. to assist you with your sculpting and what you're trying to do, right? You can turn up intensities on things. Right? Okay. Then there's some really cool brushes, right? There's so many really unique, nice brushes in here. Let's talk a couple more, and then what I want to do is scrap this, and then let's talk about pulling in the other objects, right? And starting sculpting our creature, okay? If we wanted to pick one. So pick one of those concepts. Let's talk a couple other brushes here. There's so many different ones, lots of build-up brushes, things like that. There's some brushes that allow you to knife portions of your mesh off too. Some really good ones are Trim Dynamic and Trim Adaptive. So if you look at Trim Dynamic, what this does, it almost works as like a spudger in a sense, and I can like slice off certain areas and kind of flatten things out. It really ends up making a really nice shape on things. It can create a unique look to certain areas, which can be helpful, right? You'll notice in Sea of Thieves, a lot of these objects that they have in that game, when they're sculpting, they use this brush a lot. Their artists like this brush. Okay. So Trim Dynamic and Trim Adaptive are really great. Trim Adaptive just tries to follow a little bit more of the curve and kind of guess where you want to chop things out. So you can try both of them. There's also the knife tools. So if we go to knife curve, if I hit K on my keyboard, I think. Maybe knife is only in the updated version of the software. I might have to use knife in my other one. I'm going to jump over to my other version of ZBrush when we start actually modeling. Okay. And I'm going to show you guys some brushes too that we can install. We'll go to those. It's very similar to the slice or clip curve, which is in this. So I'll show you what clip curve does. Clip curve, if I hold Control Shift, I can grab and like slice off a part of the mesh. Hopefully it doesn't crash my ZBrush. But you'll see it like actually slices through the geometry there, right? To like clip things out. So if you Control Shift and drag, anything on that shaded side is what gets clipped off. And you can tap Alt on your keyboard and it will let you put curves in there. So now it should slice off in that curve way, which can be helpful when you're trying to make certain shapes, right? Okay, so we've talked about movement, we've talked about putting stuff in 3D, we've talked about all kinds of good stuff. I'm going to jump over to my 2022 version of the software because there's some brushes and things I want to show you. I'm going to link you to some brushes that I think are good. So, and I'll show you guys how to install them. So let me close this version of ZBrush. Let me open up my version. The reason I wanted to show you and walk you through a little bit in your version is because I have a custom UI in my 22, my ZBrush 22, where I've moved some stuff around. So let's go to ZBrush 2022. And you'll notice that it looks a little bit different, but still a lot of the same things in there. You shouldn't have any problem finding what I'm talking about. I just don't want to teach you on a custom UI. Okay. So here's my ZBrush. You can see it's still relatively the same, just some things have been moved around. So let's talk about some brushes that I think would be helpful for you to install. One, because they're just super useful and they get used a bunch, and then two, because they are just like great brushes, and it's good to know kind of how to download certain brushes. So if you look inside of my brush kit here, once I put a sphere in here, I have a bunch of these extra brushes in here that are these 3D CW brushes. These are from Shane Olson's 3D character workshop. Shane Olson's an artist that worked for Disney Avalanche, that worked on Disney Infinity. He's awesome. He's really great. So he has a bunch of brushes that he's put out for ZBrush. And then there's a Blizzard artist that makes these orbs brushes that just, these orbs brushes are awesome and use it and do a really great job of like, once you use them, you'll see. But let me get you linked to those and I can show you how to put them in the software, and then we can talk about them once we start going through and using some of these things. So I have available the orb brushes right here. I can link them in the Discord. I will put them in the announcements page on this Discord. So I will link the orbs brushes here. And I will also put Shane's brushes in there as well, which I think I put in here, but I'll copy these. Oh, that's not the right one. I'll put these 3D CW brushes in here too. So you can unpack those. What you'll need to do is once you get that zip file open, okay, there's all these brushes right here. If you navigate to where ZBrush is in the Explorer, so if you go to documents, I think yours will be Max on. I think mine says Pixelogic still, but yours will probably say Max on. So if I go to wherever your ZBrush folder is, if you go to Z Startup in there, and then there is a brush presets. If you just click and drag those and drop those in here, then you can drop as many brushes in there as you want, okay? And then on startup, it will load all those brushes in. So with the Shane's brushes and these orbs brushes, you can click and drag and drop them all in there. Works great, okay? So those are all good. Once you have selected which character you're going to use, I would just download one of these pictures. I'm going to pick one of these. I don't know which one yet. Let's do it now. I kind of like this little guy. I also like this guy. I think I'll do this guy. I don't know. They're both cool. I kind of like this dude. We'll do him. Okay. Then I'm going to pull him up just on my other screen. We'll use him as a reference. So, and I'll refer to him a bunch. I'll just keep pulling him on the screen so you guys can remember which one I was using. So the first thing I'm going to do is, again, start with a sphere, right? So we'll pull in a sphere. Let's go to, so I have my sphere already. I forgot we put that in there. So that's good. Okay. Next thing I'm going to do is go to my geometry tab, and I'm going to do something we haven't talked about yet. Okay. I'm going to take this whole cube and I'm going to dynamesh, or not cube, this whole sphere, and I'm going to do what's called a dynamesh, because I want to get rid of all these triangles at the top here. I don't like those. So I'm going to dynamesh this. If I click dynamesh and click it again, what it's going to do is reset the geometry on this sphere, right? So now you can see there's not those gross triangles everywhere. A little bit more consistent of a shape of the cube, okay, or sphere. So we're here. I also hate this material, so I'm going to go to where is my material? Gotta remember where I put the material. There we go. So under material, I forgot that I moved this off of here. So under material, I can click here. I'm just going to go to the matte cap gray because I like working with this better. So, now that we're here, now I'm looking at the top of my head, so I'm going to flip it to the front. So let's start just kind of by blocking out some of this stuff. So I can do that by using that move tool, right? We have this guy, right? Kind of has a funny looking face, right? Kind of a weird shaped head. So I'm going to use my move topology tool. So if I go BMT, I'm going to keep it at this subdivision level we're at 43,000 right now. Turn on symmetry, and I'm just going to kind of start pulling some things around. I may end up doing this a lot bigger because I'm going to do some big broad kind of movements a little bit here and kind of start shaping this out. I'm moving this around. And the thing is, I kind of have to guess what the overall shape of this guy kind of is, right? Because I can't see the back side of him very well here, right? So I kind of just have to guess what that shape looks like a little bit, but that's okay. I can kind of imagine and guess fairly well what it looks like. Okay. And then when I'm here, what I can do is, because if I wanted to take this geometry and kind of remesh this, let's get it a little bit more blocked out, and then we'll dynamesh and remesh some things together. But I just want to get kind of the base idea of this guy blocked out, and then we can move on from there. So I'm going to shrink this down just a little bit. Okay. So his biggest kind of feature in the front is this big mouth. So I think if I can get the mouth figured out, then I can kind of orient myself on the model a little bit better. So I'm going to take my brush here, and I'm going to try to mask out that big silly mouth that he's got, right? So I'm going to hold Control, and I'm going to try to get this mouth figured out. Kind of does this number. I'm going to go a little bit smaller here. Kind of goes up and then something like this. Okay. I'm just holding Control to paint this mask right now. Then what I can do, there's a couple different ways we could do this. I can hit Control and click in the open space, and it's going to give me the reverse of that mask. And I could use the standard brush in the Alt version of it. Like I could hold Alt and just kind of carve in the mouth like this. That's one option, and it's not horrible. We can do that. I'm just going to try to show you some different things that we could do here. So there's one option, right? And I could turn the mask off and then kind of adjust that once I've figured out what I'm doing there. So that's one way, right? And I've kind of worked the mouth out a little bit, right? Here's the other option. And I don't hate that option, but what I could do is take the inverse of this again, and I could take the W key and just pull this back into his face a little bit, and then you do your smoothing from there, right? or you Dynamesh. There's some options there, right? So, but it would be the same thing. I just smooth this out again, right? So we essentially did the same thing, just a little quicker. The inside of the mouth looks a little different too, right? And then we'd probably still end up doing some stuff with that inside of there to make that look more correct. I also need to do some more with the body here, if looking at this, right? The mouth is also not as big as I'm making it, so I can shrink that down just a little bit, I think. Oops. Okay. I think that's a little better. So let's do it this way. I kind of liked the alt version with the standard brush. So if I go BST, I can alt, kind of push the mouth in like this. Just carve it out. Okay. So we've done this, carved that out a little bit. Now I'm going to kind of smooth this back out. Then we'll just keep kind of blocking out the rest here of his body. So we've got, you know, this kind of chest that comes off of the lips here. So I might try to mask out the lips a little bit and then pull the body down. Then I can pull his body down with the move tool, BMT. Kind of does this chest thing off of here. And I can kind of work my way. If I also decide to, I can kind of mask out around the mouth too. I might need to do a little extra work in there once I'm done, but Then I can kind of pull things around. B and then MT on your keyboard is the move. It's B on your keyboard and then MT is move topology. Just kind of smoothing that back out a little bit. Use the standard brush. In all reality, this feels like it needs to do a little bit more like this type of thing here. Just kind of shaping out the mouth a little bit there. And then this is where some other tools may come in handy a little bit. I could start appending in more pieces of geometry here to build out some more of the shape on this guy, right? I think in my brain, he's a little bit something more like that. Which is okay. Then I can bring in another piece of geometry. So this brush is super nice. This is one of those Shane's brushes, and I can use the appendage here. And I could bring in another piece of geometry in here, move this around. This is just nice. Because now I can bring, oops. Now I have that other piece of geometry in there. Now I can kind of mold this around a little bit more. And this is almost like his chest that's happening right here. I'm kind of moving this a little bit more. My little guys, the guy's arms kind of come out of there too, which is a little weird, but BMT. I'm gonna grab a different brush here really quick. So there's an inflate brush. I just don't feel like I'm getting the right shape here. I do not love what's happening here. Might scrap this and try something different here. Let's see. just do not feel like I'm getting the right shape there. And the more and more I mess with it, it's not working. So I need to think about that a little differently. So let's insert another. Let's see here. What time is it? Let's see. So we said 3:30. So let's do this. Next class, I'll go through a little bit more of that, of sculpting. Because I do want to get the screen share time with students that need to do it. But the biggest thing to take a look at, one, start by building in your spheres, right? You've got this going on. Moving stuff around. The next thing that you can do is either use the that 3D CW geometry brush, right? To bring in more geometry for different objects, right? Let's say you're trying to do different parts of the body. So you've got, you know, you're trying to bring in arms or something, right? Or you can use the append feature. So you can append different objects into. So appending cubes, right? You can append in other cubes. You can append in spheres. You can do all that kind of good stuff. And then remember to divide your geometry too. So don't work with just the base number of geometry that gets pulled in. Because if I start trying to move a cube, right? And using the move tool and painting on a cube, I'll show you what happens. It's just not very high res, right? So I can't do a ton with this cube that's gonna be very helpful until I start dividing this up, right? Then I can start painting on this, doing different things with it, right? So you can do that with your subtools. So for today, really just focus on messing around. Pick the monster that you want to do, right? This isn't due until, let's see. Let's check the assignment page. I don't think this is due for a few weeks. So we've got a whole month to work on this ZBrush model. So really the goal for today is pick which monster you're going to work on for the next few weeks. Okay. Get comfortable in ZBrush. Watch this video back a couple times if you need to remember some hotkeys and things. Let's just sculpt something for today. Don't even worry about sculpting your monster yet today. You got a whole month. So let's sculpt whatever. Maybe I'll even throw a little challenge in the Discord for you today. Something that you can throw away. Like I'll say, hey, here's a skull like I did, and you can model this for today. Okay. Get comfortable in ZBrush, and then next week in the lecture, I'll really dive into breaking my monster down and kind of how I'll take a look at it. And then in the labs, we can really get into it too. So today, like, yeah, I don't want to throw too much at you today. I'm worried that if I jump right into it, you guys have never used ZBrush, just get comfortable today, okay? Play with the software. You don't have any homework for this stuff this week, which is good. And we'll really dig in and start modeling and breaking down these creatures next week, okay? On Wednesday, I'll throw up a little challenge for you to do in the labs, a little ZBrush quick sculpt that you can turn in, and I'll create a assignment for it. So we'll say Wednesday, the 29th. We'll say ZBrush quick sculpt. And it's just a throwaway. Not a throwaway, but you'll just do it in the lab. So you won't do it outside of that. I just want you to, when you're in the lab, work on it with the TAs. And then when you're done with your lab, take that 50 minutes, work on it, and then be done with it. I don't want you to take 2 weeks on this too. So, and then I will throw up in the Discord, what you're going to quick sculpt for that day. Okay. So I'll throw up like a picture of a head or something, or a skull, or some sort of alien, something to quick model for that day. Okay. All right. I've talked to you long enough. Let's call it for today, and let's jump into those people that needed screen share time. I'm going to start calling you guys now. Okay. So I will see you guys next week, and thanks everyone for coming today. I'll see you next time.